But my favorite year of this batch is the next one, 1968. I had a really difficult time trying to decide here. There's a good 4 or 5 movies that are in the running for among my favorites of the decade. So it was tricky, but I think I found a way to represent at least most of them. And starting it off with Best Picture, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, I think it's one of the greatest achievements from like the best I can do for an objective take on film. Like just leaps and bounds the innovations. For similar reasons, I'm giving Best Director to Stanley Kubrick. This movie is a journey in more ways than one. Like my personal favorite aspect is the Hal story, of course, that eventually takes shape. But I just don't think it can be understated how throughout the film some of the sequences are just like you just wonder how they were done. And it's a game changer in terms of like what can be accomplished visually in front of a camera, and really a landmark science fiction as well. One of those ones you're not surprised when someone says it's their favorite movie. But for screenplay, I'm going to go with just a personal favorite, Night of the Living Dead. Probably worth mentioning, the story evolves a fair bit from its infancy, and there was collaboration with the cast as well. So there's a team effort here. But to me, a lot of movies are indebted to this structurally. Marrow may have been trying to make like this I Am Legend copy, but it's really an example of the magic of the chamber film. A small group of characters confined mostly to one location, contending with the situation before them. But what makes the film so great is the back and forth dialogue as the characters butt heads, formulate plans, alliances. It's just really interesting to follow. And I feel like it sets the stage for many movies thereafter on this style. And then, of course, it had the audacity to go with this like huge shocker of an ending that wasn't typically done like this. For actor, I'm going with Vincent Price in Witchfinder General. And he was no stranger to playing villains in like horror films by this point, but I'm not sure there's another where he's this deadly serious and menacing. So he's basically playing this witch hunter on like a reign of terror across various villages. Nothing supernatural happens, but he's accusing people of being witches, torturing confessions out of them. Really doesn't shy away from like the evil, the dogma, the inhumanity of this chapter in history. Apparently he and the young director Michael Reed really clashed on the making of this, but at the end of the day, I think it's one of his finest. For actress, I'm going with Mia Farrow, Rosemary's Baby, and like we're almost entirely following the story through her point of view, and it's quite a ride beginning as this young and innocent young woman to what's happening later. Does a great job of bringing out the paranoia of like what possible conspiracy she thinks might be unfolding, and then the sickliness that she endures, the hopelessness as things escalate. So yeah, really makes an impact. And I don't think the film would work nearly as well without someone who can carry that. For supporting actor, I'm going with Boris Karloff one last time in Targets, one of his last roles ever, and it's a really fitting last hurrah. He plays this veteran horror actor, Byron Orlock, a bit disillusioned with the film industry. So it's almost like autobiographical in a way too. The basic idea is through a twist of fate, an evening coincides with a horrifying real-life true crime situation. And I think what's most impressive here is Karloff was suffering from emphysema at the time, only half of a lung still functional, but he comes through even with like this long, poignant monologue and makes like a statement, a physical statement in the film's climax. And lastly, Ruth Gordon for Rosemary's Baby. So on the other side of this film, we have the outgoing, nosy older neighbor Minnie. I think she's perfectly cast to give us this curious mixture of like reassurance and unease that really guides us through like, you know, the uncertainty with what's going on over the course of this film until later on. And those are my picks for 68, a great year.
Great picks. I, had similar, it's kind of another very strong year. I think I prefer 67 slightly, but it's very close. Best picture, I've got, I've got 2001, A Space Odyssey, same pick. I just think it's super strong, one of Kubrick's very best films, probably his number one very best movie. The depiction, of just the vastness of space, the various sequences, the way that it's a more accessible film than I think people give it credit for. It's very entertaining, I find it. And I think the ending is amazing with the very up to interpretation, hard to figure out ending. And I mean, a lot of the films like that, but you have, a very untraditional beginning, untraditional end, and more of a narrative middle. And it just works so super well. I think people go into this movie expecting something totally alien, something totally like kind of art house. I certainly did. And no, I was wrong. I mean, it's a much more easy to enjoy movie. And it would be great even if it wasn't, kind of accessible on that level, but I think it's so great because it works on that level as well. Um, Director, I'm gonna do back to the spaghetti western, well, with Corbucci for The Great Silence, which is an amazing film, probably a huge influence on um, Tarantino, Hateful Eight, with the snow western setting. Just super strong stuff here, and it's atmospheric while being very kind of depressing, but also has a romantic, hopeful element to it, and just nails a lot of what I love about movies. Best story, best screenplay. Again, I already talked about this a bit, but 2001, because I think the source material is, something that's probably very difficult to adapt because it's such a complicated story, and they do a very good job of making it easy to watch and enjoy on that level, and I really like that. Um, Best actor, I'll say Malcolm McDowell in the film If, which is kind of a precursor in some ways to A Clockwork Orange in terms of his character playing this like troubled late high school, early college age kid who's like, going through the difficulties of the world he's in, and it's a very like Catcher in the Rye story. This one, it has that element of the youthful violence and dissatisfaction with society. Um, and it also has a very kind of artsy approach, which is hit or miss for me, but I think the performance makes it great, and that's a really strong highlight for me. Actress, I'll say Once Upon a Time in the West, Claudia Cardinale. It's a great movie across the board, great performances, but here she really shines as the lead with this character who's the widow, the former prostitute widow who arrives in the estate in, wherever it is, Utah or wherever, and has to deal with the kind of challenges of the West, especially with Henry Fonda's maniacal villain in this film. It's a great contrast. Um, and then for supporting actor, I'll say Klaus Kinski in The Great Silence. He is totally insane in this movie. He's off the rails. He's completely evil in this performance, which is always fun. A villain that is, feels just like some kind of cosmic evil. And then I'll stick with that for supporting actress with Vanetta McGee playing the female lead in The Great Silence. She has great chemistry with Jean-Louis Trintignant's character, and she is great as kind of the heart of the film as the widow whose snowy mountain town is being taken over by these bandits. So yeah, a very strong year. I definitely kind of diverge with you on a few, but yeah, it's so many great movies to highlight.
I guess that leaves us with just 1969, which I really didn't have too many like watched over the years for this one. I actually watched another one last night just to kind of, boost my options and give myself more context. So I'll be able to talk about that one later. But I'm going a bit off the board with my best picture choice. It's a British coming of age movie called Kes, and it's about this like young boy who lives this quaint working class community, bullied at school, not a great upbringing, has a lot of time to himself, and he eventually discovers this young kestrel, a bird in the falcon family, and bonds, trains with it, gets a sense of purpose through that. It's kind of a dark movie more than it is sentimental, more naturalistic and grounded. Feels almost a bit like a documentary that we're watching, but I like how unfiltered it is, and it's so far removed from like the trends of the time that it feels quite ahead of its time. I could easily see this, being made even in the 80s, just the way it comes across. For director is the movie I saw last night, John Schlesinger, for Midnight Cowboy. It was the big awards winner of the year with Best Picture, Director, Screenplay, and several acting noms as well, I believe. I'm giving it director because to me it's extremely visually impressive, has tones and sequences and choices that really feel like they belong more in the 70s. Strikes me as a movie ripe for analysis. There's a lot of work explored here in the areas of like masculinity, poverty, sexuality. So yeah, it's a really bold film. I'm surprised that it was almost made this early with some of the subject matter that it tackles. And for screenplay, I'm going to go with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Western loosely based on the Real Outlaws. This interpretation basically plays out like a buddy movie, does a nice job balancing humor and charm to go along with the action. And I think you need the charisma to make the dynamic work, but it's also structured for really exciting developments. And then for actor, back to Midnight Cowboy. I could have honestly gone with either of the two basically co-leads. I mean, Jon Voight is probably more the main character, but Dustin Hoffman, he's too substantial in it to be a supporting actor. And he's the one I'm ultimately giving the award to. The interaction between the leads is key. And for Hoffman, as Rizzo, Ratso, whatever you call him, is a great example showing his range. He's really nothing like some of the other roles he's known for. In this one, has this street smart side, but a really sickly figure too, and you feel the desperation of the characters through his struggles especially. And for actress, I'm gonna go with Maggie Smith for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, playing the powerhouse lead in the title. Is this like eccentric, free-spirited teacher, the type of character who genuinely cares about what she's doing, but has radical ideas and an ego that kind of guides her too. Probably a good example of a film that's elevated through its strong lead performance. For supporting, I'm gonna go with Jack Nicholson in Easy Rider. For a while, when I just knew about this movie, I didn't actually know he wasn't the lead. But he plays an alcoholic lawyer who links with Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper's character, has some great lines, brings his own presence, probably could be the film that may be attributed to kind of his future success. He was kind of transitioning into that star. He would have movies like Chinatown coming up in the next few years and stuff like that. So, and then lastly, Catherine Ross, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid again, as like the third member of the gang, brings charm and energy to the part, was famously banned from set unless she was in the scene because of some incident involving the cinematographer letting her operate a camera and the director being angry at her. But she's definitely good in what they actually have her do in the film. So yeah, those are my picks to close out the 60s.
Great picks. We've got a lot of alignment this year, I think. Best picture for me has got to be Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's just such an enjoyable popcorn movie in terms of the blend of action, comedy, everything, the music. It's so good. But it also has such a bittersweet nature to it. And it's one of those movies that you can put it on at any time and you're invested from beginning to end because it's just so damn good. That's one of those things where it's kind of hard to even talk about elements about it that aren't already talked about a lot. For best director, I'm gonna go with James Bond with Peter Hunt for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think this is on a directing level the peak of the James Bond series in terms of you really stretch out into this epic story. This one's up to, 2.5 hours. You have a huge um, plot with this. You have so many different characters, and you have stakes that are higher than probably any other of the films. And at the same time, you have massive set pieces, massive eye for action. The You have an incredibly aggressive editing style with, the jump cuts, the snap zooms, and that's combined with, extremely panoramic wide shots into just this drug-like, movie maximalism that's just hard to resist. Um, best script, I'll say William Goldman for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I actually read this script recently for class, and it was funny because the Goldman, every single line he he indicates cut to a new thing. He just like it's formatted very funnily, but it's a great movie, great script. I enjoy this, the script is what makes the movie really because it's essential to have that dialogue and that chemistry between the two lead characters of Butch and Sundance. The movie just really wouldn't work without it. Uh, and that comes across throughout the whole thing. Um, best actor, I'll say Paul Newman again, second time this episode with Butch Cassidy. He's just so good. It's the peak of him as an actor, where sometimes I think he's, one of the greatest ever movie stars in history because of the way that he is just dominates every scene with the screen presence. It's just something almost no one else has that ability, I think. Um, and then best actress, I'll say Diana Rigg in James Bond on Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's kind of, I think, the definitive Bond girl, quote unquote, although in her case it's so much more than that as a character. It's one of the, the few times where it's clearly a better performance than Bond himself. And she just steals almost every scene, even up until the very end with the tragic ending of the film. And yeah, it just really highlights why this is considered such a special entry in the series by so many. Supporting actor, I've got Jack Nicholson, Easy Rider. This is a movie that I watched for the first time recently for this, and he was definitely my favorite part. I think the other two actors are good, but they have uneven moments, whereas he is just great from start to finish. Uh, and just a great movie, great summation of the kind of ethos of the late 1960s. And a lot of that comes down to Nicholson here. And then I'm lining up with you, supporting actress with Catherine Ross for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, in that, this is a role that is written with so much more depth than you'd expect from most writers of this period. I think, and she really gets to use the stronger script here to deliver a very good performance. I love the scene where she tells Butch and Sundance that she's going to go back to the American West because she has the sense that they're about to get themselves killed. And just a lot of things like that where she has a lot of really great scenes. Obviously, her introduction is very classic and iconic as well, and just totally a great performance throughout the movie. So yeah, that's my 1969 picks.
I think we saved the last year for the most like category matches there. So
I think so, yeah. But next time will be 70s, so deep in the new Hollywood, kind of the beginning of Spielberg, Scorsese, all those people.
yeah, be quite a change. Yeah.
So yeah, stay tuned. Yeah, this was kind of the last year of a lot of the old standards we've kind of been talking about since the very beginning. So definitely going to be a totally new slate of people next episode. So yeah, stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.